The rain falls in a gentle, relentless rhythm, each drop tapping against the window like a fragile heartbeat. Inside the bustling cafeteria, the clatter of plates and muted voices swirl into a dull hum, but amidst the chaos, she stands alone, just a single waitress. No one notices her, no one looks her way. She moves through the maze of tables, invisible in the storm of corporate chatter, her uniform damp and her face a mask of quiet resilience. It's just another day, another lunch, another moment swallowed by the silence that surrounds her. And yet, somewhere in the shadows of this crowded room, unseen by all, a figure watches, the undercover CEO, cloaked in anonymity, blending into the background like a ghost. He's here, hidden behind the veneer of casual conversation, observing every detail, every flicker of emotion that passes across her face. She doesn't know he's there, doesn't realize that in this sea of faces, her quiet strength has caught someone's attention. This is the scene where worlds collide, the single waitress ignored at the company lunch, her existence a fleeting ripple in the vast ocean of corporate life. But beneath that ordinary surface lies a story waiting to unfold, a story of vulnerability and resilience, of silent sacrifices and unspoken dreams. The rain outside continues its steady song, a poetic reminder that even in the silence, life persists. And somewhere, in that quiet moment, a new chapter begins to write itself, one that will challenge everything she believes about herself, about power, and about the unseen forces that shape our lives. As the camera lingers on her face, glistening with the rain's tears, the world around her fades into a blur of noise and neglect. But her eyes hold a quiet storm, a flicker of hope, a hint of something more. Because sometimes, it's in the overlooked moments that the greatest stories are born. And in the shadows of this ordinary lunch, an extraordinary revelation is about to unfold. Stay tuned, because what happens when the unnoticed becomes essential? When the silent strength finally speaks? The answer lies just beyond the surface, waiting to be discovered. Her name is Emma, though few in the office ever bother to learn it. She's the kind of person who quietly slips into the background, her presence almost ghost-like, an unspoken reminder of the loneliness that shadows her days. Her shoulders carry a weight that isn't visible to anyone else, a heaviness born from years of feeling invisible, of loving in silence, of dreams that quietly wither away behind a facade of routine. She's been here for years, yet she still feels like a stranger in her own life, her smile fragile and fleeting, like the last glow of dusk before the darkness fully settles in. Emma's eyes, often downcast, hold a quiet sadness, an ache that never quite leaves her. She remembers the days she used to believe in hope, in possibility, but life's brutal lessons have carved deep scars into her heart. She's lost loved ones, her mother's gentle voice now a distant echo, replaced by the hollow silence of grief. Sometimes she wonders if she's just a ghost wandering between moments, waiting for something, or someone, to break through her solitude. Her hands tremble slightly when she's nervous, revealing a vulnerability she's too exhausted to hide. She's tired, not just physically but emotionally, weighed down by unspoken rejection and the quiet despair of feeling unseen. That vulnerability isn't loud or dramatic, it's the kind that settles quietly into her bones, whispering reminders that she's fragile, that she's been hurt before, and that perhaps she always will be. Yet, within that fragility lies a quiet strength, a resilience born from mere survival. She's learned to hide her wounds behind a soft smile, a subtle nod, a fleeting glance that says she's still here, still fighting, even if it's only in small, unnoticed ways. Today, she stands in the cafeteria, her eyes fixed on a distant point, feeling the weight of her loneliness seep into her bones. She's unaware of the presence watching her, of the silent observer who sees her not as a mere waitress, but as a person carrying unspoken stories. The rain continues to fall outside, a gentle rhythm echoing her own quiet tears, her unvoiced pain. Her heart beats a little faster as she takes a breath, fighting through the heaviness that threatens to drown her. In these moments of vulnerability, Emma's story unfolds, an intricate tapestry of loss, longing, and quiet hope. She is a reminder that beneath every smile hiding pain, there is a human soul yearning for connection, for understanding. And as the shadows of her grief linger, there's a flicker of something more, a fragile seed of hope that maybe, just maybe, her story isn't over yet. Because sometimes, in the quietest hearts, the most profound stories are waiting to be told. And in her vulnerability, Emma invites us to listen, to see her not just as a waitress, but as a woman with a depth of courage waiting to be uncovered. The next chapter is about to begin, and it starts with a simple truth: even in our moments of greatest weakness, we carry the potential for transformation. The rain had eased into a soft drizzle, the kind that blurs the edges of the world and wraps everything in a muted gray. Emma moved slowly through the cafeteria, her movements careful, almost hesitant, as if she were afraid to disturb the fragile silence that surrounded her. That's when he appeared, a man, roughly her age, with a tired look etched into his face, carrying a battered canvas bag over his shoulder. His presence was unremarkable at first, just another face lost in the crowd, yet there was something in the way he paused near the doorway that caught her attention, a quiet hesitation, a moment of pause in a busy day. He didn't approach her directly, didn't say a word. Instead, he stood there for a beat, eyes flickering over the room, then settled on her. Emma noticed how he seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 unspoken stories, his shoulders slightly hunched, like someone fighting to carry a burden too heavy for words. His gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary, and then he quietly moved to the side, taking a seat at a corner table. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but for Emma, it felt like a gentle ripple in an otherwise still pond. Throughout the day, she caught glimpses of him quietly observing, offering small gestures that went unnoticed by others. When the line at the coffee machine grew long, he stepped aside to let someone else go ahead. When a coworker accidentally knocked over a cup of water, he was the first to reach for a napkin, not with grand gestures, but with the kind of humility that feels like an apology in itself. His actions were unassuming, imperfect even, perhaps a little clumsy, perhaps a little awkward, but sincere. Like a quiet acknowledgement that kindness doesn't need to be loud to be meaningful. Emma watched him from a distance, feeling the faint stirrings of something unfamiliar, an echo of empathy, a gentle reminder that human connection often starts with the smallest acts. She wondered what stories lay behind those tired eyes, what struggles he carried beneath that rough exterior. There was nothing heroic about him, no grand gestures or sweeping declarations, only a series of small, imperfect moments that hinted at a deeper humanity. As she cleaned a nearby table, her eyes flicked to him once more. Their gazes met briefly, a fleeting yet profound exchange, an unspoken understanding passing between two quiet souls. The rain continued to patter softly on the windows, a lullaby for those who listened closely. Emma felt her heart beat a little slower, a little steadier, as if the simple presence of this stranger had offered her a tiny, fragile space to breathe. He didn't say much, didn't make her feel seen in a dramatic way, but in that understated act of presence, he changed the atmosphere. It was as if a single, gentle ripple had touched the surface of her world, reminding her that kindness isn't about perfection or grandiosity. Sometimes, it's just about showing up, imperfect, vulnerable, human, and letting the small acts weave quietly into something more profound. And as the rain's soft song continued outside, Emma wondered if maybe, just maybe, this unassuming stranger might be a thread in her story, a whisper of hope in a landscape of silence. Because sometimes, the smallest gestures hold the greatest power to shift everything. And perhaps, in the quiet corners of our daily lives, the seeds of change are already quietly taking root. The rain had started again, softer this time, as if the sky itself was hesitant to spill its tears too forcefully. Emma found herself beneath the small awning outside the cafeteria, clutching a crumpled paper bag of leftovers she hadn't yet touched. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the weight of her thoughts, those quiet, persistent voices of loneliness that refused to be silenced. She was about to step back inside when she noticed him again, the man who had been quietly observing her all day, now approaching with hesitant steps. Without a word, he reached into his battered bag and offered her a wrap sandwich, the simplest gesture, yet somehow it felt like an anchor in her storm of solitude. Emma hesitated, then took it, the faintest of smiles breaking through her guarded expression. In that small exchange, a fragile bridge was formed, built on unspoken understanding. Over the next few days, their interactions grew like delicate seedlings pushing through the soil, slow, tentative, rooted in small acts. He would sometimes leave a cup of coffee on her tray, not with fanfare, but with a quiet nod. She would find him waiting at the same corner during lunch, offering her a piece of his own lunch, an extra apple, a piece of bread, each time a reminder that she was seen, even if only in the tiniest way. Emma began to notice the gentle rhythm of his kindness, how he seemed to always be there, just within reach but never intrusive. It was in the way he held the door open when her hands were full, and the way he offered his umbrella when the rain threatened to soak her through, even when she tried to decline, too proud or too tired to accept. One afternoon, as she hurried across the parking lot, a sudden gust of wind threatened to overturn her umbrella. Before she could even react, he was there, steadying it with a quiet, unassuming hand. "Let me," he said softly, his voice almost lost in the wind's roar. Emma nodded, her cheeks warming, not from the cold, but from something she couldn't quite name. The small act of holding the umbrella shielded her from more than just rain. It temporarily lifted the invisible wall she'd built around herself, if only for a moment. Later, when she was overwhelmed with the relentless ache of her memories, the loss of her mother, the ache of feeling forgotten, he simply sat beside her in silence, sharing a book he'd brought along, not demanding conversation but offering companionship in her solitude. They didn't speak much that day, but the quiet presence of someone who didn't expect her to be strong, who simply sat with her amidst the storm, felt like a balm. On a particularly cold morning, she found her shoes soaked from the dew, her steps sluggish and heavy. Without a word, he handed her a pair of dry socks he'd slipped from his bag, a humble act that rippled through her, an acknowledgement of her vulnerability, of her need for kindness that didn't demand anything in return. Emma looked at him, surprise flickering in her eyes, not because of the gesture but because of the quiet acceptance it carried. Each small act, sharing food, holding the umbrella, offering quiet companionship, was like a gentle crack in her armor, breaking down the walls built from years of loneliness. These moments, seemingly insignificant, began to stitch a fragile fabric of connection, one that Emma clung to in her quiet desperation to feel less alone. Yet beneath these acts of kindness, a storm was brewing, an external conflict that threatened to unravel everything she'd started to build. The shadows of her past, the weight of unspoken grief, and the looming uncertainty of her future all pressed inward. The rising external conflict was no longer distant. It was knocking at her door, threatening to drown her in chaos. But for now, she held on to these small acts, these quiet gestures that reminded her she was not invisible, that she mattered, bit by fragile bit. And as the rain continued its gentle rhythm, Emma realized that sometimes, it's not the grand gestures that save us, but the smallest acts of kindness, simple, imperfect, human, that begin to restore what was broken inside. Each act was a whisper of hope, a soft assurance that she was not alone in this storm, and that in the quiet moments, life still had the power to bloom anew. The morning arrived heavy with an unspoken tension, the sky a slate gray that seemed to mirror Emma's restless mind. She had grown accustomed to the quiet comfort of her small routines, the subtle acts of kindness, the gentle companionship that had begun to seep into her fractured world. But today, an undercurrent of unease rippled beneath it all. A text message blinked on her phone, sharp and unwelcome, her sister's voice, hurried and tense, calling from the other end of the city. "Emma, I saw the photos online, about your job, about the cafe. People are talking. It's not safe for you to be there anymore." Emma's heart clenched painfully. She knew what that meant, rumors swirling, judgment passing like a cold wind through her fragile sanctuary. Her sister's words echoed in her mind, a reminder of the world's unyielding gaze. Her family had always been strict, holding tightly to their reputation and their expectations. Her mother's voice, once gentle, now haunted her with its unspoken disappointment. "You're better than this," she'd say, often with a sigh that carried both love and resignation. Emma's cheeks grew hot with shame, her hands trembling as she clutched her lunch bag. The small, kind gestures she'd shared with the man who had quietly become her anchor now felt like fragile pieces of a puzzle that was quickly falling apart. She looked over, searching for him amidst the morning's chaos, but he was absorbed in his own thoughts, unaware of the storm gathering around her. The external threat was clear, a wave of gossip that threatened to drown her, to wipe away the fragile support she had begun to build. Her stomach twisted at the thought of her reputation unraveling, of her simple acts of kindness being twisted into something scandalous or embarrassing. The community's judgment was sharp, and the fear of rejection clawed at her like a cold hand gripping her heart. That afternoon, as she moved through the cafeteria, she felt the weight of countless eyes, whispers that seemed to ripple like ripples in a disturbed pond. Her shoulders hunched instinctively, trying to make herself as invisible as she had once been. But then, she felt him beside her again, not with words, but with a quiet presence, a gentle touch on her arm, an offer of his umbrella, a subtle gesture of support amid the storm. His eyes met hers, silently saying, "I'm here." Yet, even that simple reassurance couldn't fully shield her from the mounting external chaos. By evening, the rumors had reached a fever pitch. A co-worker's hushed whisper about her being unfit for the corporate world, about her poor choices, floated through the room like a toxic cloud. The once hidden shadow of judgment now loomed over her, threatening to consume her small flicker of hope. Emma felt her breath catch, her vision blurring with tears she fought to contain. She wondered if the quiet kindness she'd received was enough to withstand this storm. She looked toward him again, his face shadowed, but his eyes unwavering. The external obstacle was a tidal wave threatening to drown her, to wipe away her fragile sense of worth and belonging. Yet, in that moment, she realized that their bond, built on small acts, on shared moments of vulnerability, was a lifeline she couldn't afford to let go. His presence, imperfect and human, was a reminder that even when the world turns cold and judgmental, there remains a quiet loyalty, a steadfast support that refuses to abandon her. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, as if echoing her internal storm. Emma's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and resolve. The external obstacle had come crashing down, testing everything she had begun to build. But amid the chaos, she clung to the hope that loyalty and kindness, those small, imperfect acts, could still be enough to weather the hardest storms. And she understood, painfully but clearly, that sometimes, the greatest strength is simply holding on, despite the raging tempest around you. He didn't speak much that afternoon, but his presence was a steady anchor amid the growing chaos. Emma felt him nearby, just outside her peripheral vision, a quiet reassurance that she wasn't alone. When the whispers grew louder, he remained at her side, his gaze calm and unwavering, a silent witness to her struggle. He didn't need to offer grand promises or miraculous solutions. His simple proximity was enough to remind her she was seen, that her worth wasn't defined by rumors or judgment. As she moved through the room, her shoulders weighed down by the invisible burden of others' opinions, he stayed close, his footsteps slow but steady. When she hesitated, hesitant to face the relentless whispers, he would gently fall into step beside her, matching her pace. At times, he simply listened, quietly, patiently, allowing her to voice her fears and doubts without pressuring her to find answers. His presence felt human, real, rooted in the understanding that sometimes, the greatest support is a steady silence, a non-judgmental space to breathe and be vulnerable. He knew the power of small gestures, an unspoken offer of his umbrella when the rain started again, a subtle nod when a coworker cast a knowing glance her way, a gentle hand on her back when she felt like collapsing. Nothing flashy, nothing heroic. Just consistent, genuine acts that said, "I'm here," without demanding anything in return. Emma noticed how he didn't try to fix her problems or dismiss her fears. Instead, he simply stayed near, a quiet presence that unraveled some of her tightly wound knots of anxiety. That evening, as the shadows lengthened and the storm outside persisted, they found themselves walking side by side along a dimly lit path. The rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, the kind that soothes more than it stings. Emma's mind was a tangled web of doubt and exhaustion, but his silent companionship offered a gentle rhythm, a slow, steady beat that echoed her own internal resilience. Her eyes flickered to him, and she saw not a hero, but a person who refused to turn away, who understood that loyalty often manifests in consistency rather than grand gestures. "Thanks," she finally whispered, voice barely audible over the whispering rain. He looked at her, eyes soft but firm, and nodded. No words were needed. His quiet support had already spoken volumes. It was enough to remind her that even in the face of external storms, gossip, judgment, rejection, the human connections that withstand quietly and patiently can become the bedrock of strength. She could feel the subtle shift within her, a slow awakening of something she'd buried deep, hope, perhaps, or a flicker of courage. His steadfastness had become a mirror to her own resilience, a testament that even amidst the chaos, genuine loyalty endures. It was not a miraculous cure, but a reminder that sometimes, just having someone stay beside you, unconditionally, is enough to illuminate the path forward. As they continued walking, the rain softened into a mist that seemed to wrap around them like a gentle embrace. Emma's footsteps grew steadier, her shoulders lighter, and her gaze clearer. The external storm still raged, but inside her, a quiet storm of her own was beginning to settle. And in that stillness she understood that real support isn't about fixing everything overnight. It's about showing up, day after day, with patience and kindness, trusting that even the smallest acts of loyalty can spark the quiet strength needed for transformation. The rain's gentle fall became a lullaby, whispering of new beginnings, of hope rooted in the simple, human act of standing firm. Emma took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her fears loosen just a little more, knowing she was no longer walking alone. Sometimes, the strongest support is a steady hand, a kind gaze, and the silent promise that no matter how fierce the storm, someone will stay. And that, perhaps, is enough to begin healing. The storm had passed, both outside and within Emma's mind. The rain had long since given way to a softer drizzle, and with it, the weight that had pressed so heavily on her shoulders began to lift, inch by fragile inch. For the first time in a long while, she found herself pausing amid the quiet hum of the cafe, her gaze drifting to the sunlight filtering through the windows, casting gentle patterns on the worn wooden tables. She felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, hope, stirring softly in her chest. It wasn't a thunderous revelation or a sudden burst of confidence, but a subtle awakening, like the first light of dawn after a long night. She remembered the dreams she had tucked away, buried beneath layers of doubt and silence, dreams of creating, of sharing her voice, of finding purpose beyond the shadows that had haunted her for years. A small, tentative smile curled her lips as she realized she wasn't entirely lost anymore. It was as if the storm had washed away the grime of harsh judgments, revealing a clearer view of her own worth. She didn't need anyone to rescue her. She had always carried the seeds of resilience within her, hidden beneath the scars. Now, those seeds felt nourished by the quiet support of the one who had stayed nearby, not to fix her, but to remind her that she was capable of standing on her own. Emma began to notice the small things, the way her fingers moved more confidently when she cleaned the tables, the way her voice grew steadier when she asked a customer how they liked their coffee. These weren't monumental changes, but they were enough to whisper to her that her journey wasn't over. It was merely beginning. She started to see herself through a different lens, not as someone invisible, broken, waiting for rescue, but as a person who could shape her own path, however slowly. That day, she took a step, just one, by sharing a story with a regular customer about her childhood dreams of painting. Her voice was soft at first, hesitant as a fragile bud, but it grew steadier with each word. The customer listened, nodding with genuine interest, and Emma felt a flicker of pride ignite within her. It was small, but it was real. Her worth was no longer dictated by others' judgments, or by her silent fears. It was rooted in the quiet strength she was beginning to nurture, the strength to dream again, to create, to teach herself that her voice mattered. Emma knew that her healing was fragile, that the shadows could return if she let her guard down entirely, but she also understood that her story wasn't just about survival. It was about growth, about rediscovering the light she thought was lost forever. Her smile, once rare and guarded, now felt more genuine, more alive. She was starting to see herself as a vessel of hope, not just for herself, but for others who might sit in her place someday. She envisioned herself sharing her journey, not as a victim, but as someone who had learned to stand tall amid the storm. As the days passed, Emma's small acts of courage multiplied. She painted again in her free moments, her brushstrokes becoming bolder and more confident. She began to teach her coworkers simple kindnesses, sharing her story without shame, inspiring others to find their own worth anew. Her transformation was subtle but profound, an internal awakening that no external storm could undo. And in the quiet glow of her newfound purpose, she realized that her worth had always been within her, patiently waiting to be uncovered. The storm had shaped her, but it would no longer define her. She was a vessel of resilience, a spark of hope that flickered warmly in the darkness. She was slowly, beautifully, becoming her own lighthouse, guiding herself and others through the fog, with a gentle, unwavering light. Emma's breath caught softly as she looked toward the horizon, where the sky was clearing, and the future shimmered with possibility. Her journey was still unfolding, but she knew now that the greatest strength came from within, from embracing her own worth, her passions, her voice. And with that realization, she was ready to face whatever came next, confident, resilient, and finally, truly free. The town square was alive with the hum of voices, the scent of fresh flowers, and the gentle glow of late afternoon sunlight filtering through the trees. Emma stood at the edge of the small makeshift stage, hands trembling slightly, her heart pounding in her chest like a drumbeat she couldn't quite control. The crowd gathered, some familiar faces, others strangers, all drawn by the community event, an open mic to celebrate resilience, stories, and new beginnings. She had come here with a quiet resolve, knowing this moment was hers to face, not to hide from. The whispers of her past, the doubts, the fears, still lingered, but they felt lighter now, less like chains and more like echoes. She took a slow breath, grounding herself in the knowledge that her voice deserved to be heard, not silenced by the weight of judgment. As she stepped forward, a hush fell over the crowd, eyes fixed on her. She looked out at the faces, some curious, some skeptical, and then, softly, she began to speak. Her voice was steady and clear, carrying across the open space. She told her story, of the quiet battles she'd fought, of the storm that once threatened to drown her, and of the small but unwavering support that had helped her find her footing again. She spoke of dreams she'd buried, of fears she'd carried like invisible scars, and of the realization that her worth wasn't dictated by others' opinions but rooted deep within her. Her words wove through the air like a gentle breeze, touching hearts, stirring memories of their own struggles. She shared her journey of rediscovery, of learning to see herself as more than her past mistakes or the whispers of judgment. Emma's voice didn't waver. Instead, it grew stronger, more confident, as she realized she was no longer just telling her story, she was reclaiming it. When she finished, silence settled, heavy and profound, before erupting into applause. Not polite claps, but genuine, heartfelt acknowledgement, an embrace from the community that had once cast shadows on her path. Emma's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but this time, they were tears of gratitude and liberation. She had faced her fears head-on, in front of everyone, and in doing so, she had broken free from the chains of silence and shame. The crowd's acceptance was a mirror, reflecting her own growing belief that her worth was undeniable, that her story mattered. A few people stepped forward, offering words of encouragement, nodding in understanding, and sharing their own stories of struggle and hope. The town, once a place of judgment, was transforming into a space of connection and compassion. Emma looked at the faces surrounding her, some familiar, some strangers, and felt a quiet strength settle deep within. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the culmination of her internal healing and growth. Her courage had illuminated a path not only for herself but for others who might have been afraid to speak, to be seen, to be heard. The sky above was tinged with the warm hues of sunset, casting a golden glow over the gathering, as if nature itself was celebrating her triumph. Emma stepped down from the stage, her heart lighter, her spirit renewed. The community's acceptance was more than applause. It was a promise that her voice, once silenced, now carried the power to inspire change. She knew that this was just the beginning, not an end, but a new chapter where her story could ripple outward, touching others and sparking their courage. As she moved through the crowd, she felt the gentle wind brush against her cheek, a whisper of hope, of endless possibilities. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky filled with stars, each one a reminder that even in darkness, there is light, waiting patiently to be discovered. Emma's journey of healing had led her here, to a place of truth, acceptance, and renewal. And in that moment, she understood that true courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to stand tall despite it, knowing that her voice was now a beacon, guiding her forward into a future she was finally ready to embrace. Emma sat quietly on the porch, the evening air cool against her skin, as the soft glow of sunset painted the sky in hues of amber and violet. Her hands rested in her lap, trembling slightly, not from fear but from a mixture of anticipation and a quiet hope that had been growing within her. Across from her, her mother hesitated, her eyes searching Emma's face as if trying to read the words she couldn't yet find. For a long moment neither spoke, the silence filled with unspoken memories, some tender, others painful, woven into the fabric of their shared history. Her mother finally took a step closer, her voice soft but trembling with emotion. "Emma, I've been wrong. I see that now. I was so afraid of losing what little I thought I had, afraid of the judgment I believed the world would cast upon you. But I was wrong to judge you, wrong to dismiss your pain, your strength." Tears welled in her eyes, and she reached out, gently taking Emma's hands in hers, her fingers trembling. "You've shown incredible courage today, more than I could have ever expected, and I am sorry I couldn't see that before." Emma felt her throat tighten, her heart pounding in her chest. The years of silence, of distance, seemed to dissolve in those words, replaced by a fragile but genuine hope. She looked into her mother's eyes, seeing the remorse, the longing for understanding, and a love that had been buried beneath her fears and misconceptions. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady but filled with emotion. "I needed you to see me, not just for my mistakes, but for who I am now. I've learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened, but about choosing to move forward together, with understanding." Her mother's tears spilled over, and she pulled Emma into a gentle embrace, holding her as if she might slip away. "I promise I will try to do better," she whispered. "To listen, to support you, even when I don't understand everything. Because you're my daughter, and I love you, more than any mistake I've ever made." Emma closed her eyes, leaning into the embrace, feeling the warmth of her mother's love seep into her bones. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of healing, of rebuilding what had been broken. She realized that forgiveness was a slow process, a delicate bloom that unfurled inch by inch, rooted in patience and genuine remorse. Her mother's words, sincere and heartfelt, were a gentle rain nourishing that fragile flower. As they stood there, the sky above transitioned into twilight, stars beginning to twinkle softly into existence. The gentle night air carried a sense of serenity, an acknowledgement that wounds can heal, truths can be spoken, and bonds can be restored, even after the deepest scars. Emma felt a quiet peace settle over her, knowing that her journey had led her here, to a moment of redemption that was neither rushed nor forced, but earned through vulnerability and truth. Her mother's forgiveness was an anchor, grounding her in the understanding that love, once fractured, could be mended with patience and compassion. Emma gazed at the stars, now shining brighter than ever, a constellation of hope illuminating her path forward. She knew that reconciliation wasn't a single act but a continual choice, one that required courage, humility, and an open heart. And as she looked into her mother's eyes, she understood that their story was still being written, each word a step toward healing, each moment a testament to the resilience of love. The night stretched softly around them, a poetic reminder that even the deepest wounds can transform into sources of light, guiding us through darkness toward dawn. Emma's heart was lighter now, filled with a quiet assurance that forgiveness, like the stars above, was infinite, shining endlessly, inviting her to embrace the future with hope and grace. The journey of healing was hers to walk step by step, into the dawn of a new beginning. As the night settled softly over the town, a gentle hush fell like a velvet blanket, wrapping everything in quiet serenity. Emma stood at the edge of the small hill overlooking the place she called home, her gaze lifted to the vast canvas above, a tapestry of stars shimmering with timeless patience. The moon, a silent guardian, cast a gentle glow, illuminating the contours of the world she had once thought was too heavy to carry. Yet here she was, standing rooted in a new understanding, her heart slowly unfurling like a delicate blossom opening to the dawn. The stars twinkled with a subtle brilliance, each one whispering stories of resilience, of wounds healed by love's quiet persistence. In the stillness, she felt the soft lull of the wind, carrying the scent of blooming flowers, memories of rain, and the promise of morning's first light. It was as if the universe itself was reminding her that even in darkness, there is beauty, an endless cycle of night giving way to dawn. Love, she realized, was never about magic or sudden salvation. It was about showing up, again and again, in small gestures, in silent understanding, in the unspoken promise that no one is truly alone. That even in moments of despair, there is a quiet strength in simply being there, listening, forgiving, and opening one's heart to the possibility of new beginnings. Emma's gaze drifted to the horizon where the first hints of sunrise began to color the sky in soft pinks and golds. The world was awakening, just as she was, in her own time, in her own way. The silence around her was filled with a gentle music, the rustling leaves, the distant song of a bird greeting the dawn, the heartbeat of the earth itself reminding her that life persists, resilient and unwavering. She breathed in deeply, tasting the freshness of hope and renewal. Her journey, woven through pain and healing, had led her here, at the cusp of a new chapter, where love was no longer a fleeting wish but a steady presence rooted in understanding and compassion. The stars above, once distant and cold, now felt like old friends, shining not in judgment but in solidarity, whispering that no matter how dark the night, the light within us can still shine brightly, guiding us through shadows toward the promise of morning. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, letting the cool breeze brush against her skin, feeling the quiet power of her own resilience, proof that love is not about perfection but about connection, about holding on when everything seems to be falling apart, and finding beauty in the broken pieces. As the sun slowly rose, spilling golden rays across the landscape, she understood that her story was part of something larger, a continual cycle of hope that never truly fades. Each star, each dawn, each silent moment of courage was a testament to the truth: no one is truly alone. We all carry light within us, waiting for the right moment to shine through the darkness. So if you've ever felt lost in the shadows, know that your story isn't over. The dawn is always waiting just beyond the horizon, whispering that love, steadfast, gentle, persistent, is the greatest proof that you are never truly alone. Take a moment today to breathe in that hope, to reach out to someone who needs to hear your kindness, to remember that even small acts of love ripple outward, transforming shadows into light. Like the stars that silently illuminate the night, your presence can be a guiding light for others. Share this story, like it, subscribe, and pass it forward, because in doing so, you're sowing the seeds of hope, reminding someone else that they, too, are part of this vast, beautiful universe, brimming with endless possibility. And as the sun climbs higher, casting warmth and promise across the world, let your heart be open, trust in the quiet strength of love to carry you through, always. For in the end, it's not magic that saves us, it's the simple, unwavering truth that we are never alone in this vast, starlit sky.